Alright guys, such comic again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far, and what a first day of the World Championship that we have had going into today. Some thought maybe we're not going to get any upsets. Maybe this tournament is going to be just as boring as the month that preceded it, but absolutely not going to be the case. Going into this tournament, we expected two teams to be making it to the grand finals. As it stands, that cannot be the case any longer based on the results of today. What does this mean for the rest of the tournament? Who's going to lift that trophy in a couple of days' time? Because it's been blown wide open by the results of these last few hours. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it, and let's get right into it. All-star team of the season, this is what we have, and really no surprises for the first all-star team. Scrappy and Cellium as the ARs, HyDra and Simp as the SMGs. No real surprise there. Now, there was a bit of drama about how this was announced, and really just the elephant in the room being the venue itself today. You know, look, it's Thursday at the World Championship. It's going to fill up over the course of the weekend. I think the fact that the venue is so big and the way that things are set up with the centre stage is spectacular, but equally it means that where the walkouts happen, the fans like to congregate, at least in the bowl section, towards the centre. There's lots of fans on the floor part in like the VIP type zone or whatever, but it means that it doesn't look like it's absolutely buzzing in there. I think from what people have said, it's busier in person than it feels like it is from home. But I know that people have watched this event so far and watched the Counter-Strike Major in Austin last weekend, and understandably drawing a few comparisons, right? But obviously we've got some series to talk about today. We can discuss, let's say, the legacy of this year's World Championship as well in due course. But this is the second All-Star team, and for the first time, I think, in the history of the Call of Duty League, there is no Shotzzy here. That's been the case every year for the last 5 years or whatever. Not the case this time around. Drazah makes it. I mean, I think all of these four you could debate. I think JoeDeceives, in my opinion, did deserve it as one of the SMG spots. I think Rancor absolutely deserved it as one of the AR spots. You could have maybe even put Ghosty in here. I think Drazah, in my opinion, totally deserved. Maybe one of the more controversial here is aBeZy. I know that some would have said that Neptune could have made it, maybe should have made it instead. I don't mind aBeZy making it for sure, but I think you could argue that Neptune was the stronger SMG this season. So I think they got the ARs right. On the SMGs, I think there's a bit of a debate. This was the overall ranking, by the way. So what the fans said, the players, the coaches, general managers, and then the talent and the media. I didn't vote in this, so, take it as you will. But the players and the fans or whatever, HyDra was clear number one, Simp was clear number two for SMGs, so that was clearly the first team. And then JoeDeceives and aBeZy beat everyone out. aBeZy was pretty interesting. The fans put aBeZy at 7th, the coaches at 5, the talent and the media at 3, but the players had him at 3rd. So, whatever you guys think about that, aBeZy, I think in general with the players, I'm not saying they're wrong, it's just they do tend to base maybe a little bit more on name value. They say, well, this guy, okay, like he's still aBeZy at the end of the day. And of course, they also play against him, so they know the impact. So I think there's two sides of the coin with the players, whether you take their votes to mean more, as in they play the guys day in, day out, or whether you think that the players are maybe even more biased in their assessment because they're in the game and they've played against these guys for years than the people watching from outside. Two ways to look at it. Envoy narrowly missed out on the spot instead of aBeZy. That's the other name that, of course, you could throw in. Neptune as well, I think you could have considered. Shotzzy also made it, although the players didn't rate him very highly. Maybe Huke could have been here instead. That was the SMG tier list. The AR tier list looked something like this. Well, it looked actually exactly like this. And it's pretty clear that Scrappy was number one by an absolute mile. Then it was Cellium. Then it was Rancor. Then it was Drazah. Ghosty, Abuzah were next up on the list. So intrigued to your thoughts as ever in the comment section below. As Octane says, don't want to criticize things too early, but they maybe could have run all stars on the Saturday or something. I don't know. The fact that they just did the walkout, no one was really there. I don't really think that was the best decision. In hindsight, time will tell. But let's get into the series, baby, because wow, this was a pretty mega day. And Surge played Heretics to start things off. Thought this is pretty cool. Apparently in the crowd you can see this ring around the outside, which is, let's say, it links to how much the players are yapping. So you get a feeling of how much they're communicating, what the energy is like in the team. Thought that was actually a really cool touch, having added that. But Surge came out swinging the game one. They dominated Miami. I was like, wow, they look like they're back. 0-4 had a stellar start to the game. There's been a month off. Teams sometimes maybe they're going to come out slow in a couple of these series. We saw that with Miami, but after they won the Search and Destroy, even though Renkar's RCXC went through the floor, it then became a very different story indeed. And from here to the end of the series, it was like absolutely a masterclass of Miami Heretics, right? And I will say as well, I was a little bit confused by the veto decisions. I know that maybe Skyline wasn't ended up in here, but like Hacienda is such a good map for Miami. Like they love this map. So allowing them to have it the game 4, I thought was an interesting decision from Surge, because if you end up in a position where you're down 2-1 going into 4, you're probably going to lose. That's exactly what happened here. So Miami really locked in and closed out the final few maps of this series. I thought they were going to win it. I thought maybe in 4, maybe in 5. But Surge, after such a stellar map 1, it all fell apart for them badly, right? And fair play to Metals, rebounding from what was a horrific map 1 to really play well the rest of the series. Rincor and Super lost a 1v2 they should never lose on the dealership, but they still won the map, and then they bounced back and won the rest of the series too. And the way that the rest of the day went for Miami, you know, they will look at this bracket now and feel like, you know what, this could be our tournament, right? I mean, could you imagine the scenes if we get some remarkable result at this World Championship? Because right now it is well and truly on after especially this result. LA Thieves versus Boston. Now, we talked about this series for quite some time. I even mentioned it to Cammy in Dallas after the DreamHack event. I was like, look, you're playing Thieves again round 1 at Champs, so what's your feelings? And he was like, well, we beat them back at Major 2, why not? We can do it again. And I've said this now for quite some time. Look, I thought that Thieves were going to win the series. I didn't have the balls to take Boston, to be honest, even though I still have a bit of a soft spot for the Boston team. And I felt like, and I said it multiple times in videos, that this was a series to look out for more than some people were considering. And EasyMac ran the numbers on this, looked at, let's say, the maps these guys like to play and their respective matchups, and found that really, this is a very good matchup for Boston. They match up really nicely against this Thieves team from multiple different angles. And you've got to consider, Thieves have not spent the last month prepping for Boston. I talked about this a lot in videos, whereas Boston have spent the last 4 weeks prepping for this one specific game. And I think we saw a lot of that when it comes to the Search and Destroy. They were so confident and so well drilled that they just knew how they were going to win this series. And I felt like of all the teams out there, yeah, there have been some teams grinding. There have been some teams putting in less effort, I imagine. I always felt like Boston would be one of the teams to put in the real hard graft. They might not be the most talented team in the world, but they will grind and they will prepare well. And I think in many respects, this was an ideal series for them to show that. But the reason why, from what I've said just then, I didn't pick Boston or make too much noise about it is because this basically happened back at the second major of the year back in Dallas. Boston beat Thieves round 1. So I was pretty convinced that this time, because that happened in Dallas and because that was detrimental to their tournament run, Thieves would come in here and make absolutely sure it didn't happen again. Prepare well, make sure you're playing your best stuff, you're not complacent at all for this type of series. And they started off strong. They came out swinging the game 1, but then it was a Snoopy masterclass in the Search and Destroys. Search and Destroy, as I've said before, is going to determine this championship. The finals is a best of 9 with 4 Search and Destroys. S&D is critical. Thieves effectively won their major 4 on their great S&D in many respects. This tournament so far, well, it's obviously been a bit of a different story. Boston pull off a masterclass. Maybe that's a bit of a struggle for Thieves for the rest of the tournament. I guess we'll see. But okay, you can lose the game 2 Search if you win your bread and butter. They go to a Vault Control, a map they should absolutely win. And frankly, it's not even that they should win it because they're the better team. They should win it because they have the advantage in this map. They had multiple opportunities to win this map, but there were some big mistakes. I mean, even in the respawn, they were up big in the respawn. We heard the comms with HyDra. You know, he didn't sound particularly enthralled. There was Ghosty, made a couple of, I think, key errors during this map. Like, you know, even the number of the guys, I think, made a number of key errors. And it didn't feel like, you know, those guys... Look, Boston played very well. They deserve lots of credit. And wow, Purge, what a player, right? I even called this in the pre-show today. I sat down with Donna right at the end of the show. I said, people were asking, okay, who's your like unexpected standout performer of the day? And I said, Purge. And I'll take it. Yeah, I'll take it. Sound like a ball knower because he came out and delivered the goods. This is, to be fair, his bread and butter map. Like, he loves this stuff. Like this Vault Control, Vault Hardpoint, stuff like that. That's when Purge delivers his best stuff. And I think just the way that this matchup worked maybe got in Thieves' head a little bit, given that, you know, they were getting out-energied by the team on the other side of the stage. There was no other way to look at it. And Thieves looked to be a little bit shell-shocked by the way that things were going. But as Innie says, this was looking familiar, right? We saw this in Vanguard when Thieves won the championship. They played Boston round 1. It went game 5, round 11, and Thieves lost. But on this occasion, it did not go that way. Boston went huge. Yes, HyDra was pulling off some pretty crazy wall bangs, which in the end didn't make too much difference because Boston were incredibly well drilled again on the map 5 search and destroy. Down goes the number 1 seed, and they drop down to the losers bracket. Look at the type of energy here that Purge bringing. You know, you guys suck. That's the second time this has happened this season, and what an awesome moment for the Boston guys, and for frankly the tournament as well. Look, do I want that FaZe Thieves match? Do I want it to, you know, did I want that as the final? Sure, but the way this tournament now looks, I mean, wow, we have a serious event on our hands right here out in Kitchener. As Cammy says, S&D's going to win championships, right? Every single team that won today will be feeling mega confident. Nadeshot wasn't so happy about it because he was feeling good after the game one. That rather swiftly fell apart. There are plenty of memes doing the rounds, understandably, as a result of this one. And Nadeshot says, damn, I need to teach these boys how to lock the hell back in. And as Parasite says, nobody's ever won champs and losers round one. Well, we'll see. Maybe this year for a number of teams could be a different story. But what a series, honestly, from the Boston Breach. Purge, I mean, Snoopy in the search and destroys was mega. 11-3 on the game 2, 8-3 on the final map, 19-6 Snoopy over these 2 search and destroys as they win the series. Purge pulled off the masterclass on the game 3, 41-22 for the win. So, yeah, what a performance, right? But Thieves, they win the 2 hardpoints, but again, Search and Destroy wins championships. You get Neslo'd first round by Boston. It's not what they were looking for. We're going to talk OpTic FaZe in a second. Before we get there, you know, I thought it was pretty funny, this little background they had set up here for the interview with Slasher before they went on to play Toronto. This was a series that Ravens will be pretty frustrated about. Game 1, I don't really understand what I'm watching. TJ, Slasher, and Rex were just in absolute hell, TJ especially. Gwinn dropped 40 and was looking left and right and saying, lads, like, what are we doing here? Can I get some help, please? So, look, obviously you can look at this a number of different ways. The reality is the Ravens, they've been cooked for a while. It's the drop Vivid curse again. It's not like they were great towards the end of the tenure with Vivid, but you know when you drop him, it just always gets worse. And we've seen that again here, really. To be fair, they gave themselves a chance in this series. Beans was squirting all over the main stage. There was actually a close-up of this as well, but this is the best that we have after the fact. Thought that was rather funny. But they end up going, I mean, look, this was map 1. It was an absolute demolition job, and it would have been a 50-point club if not for Gwinn actually getting some kills. And then the final map of the series was a complete breakdown. Like, they should never have lost this. Just a completely disastrous way to lose, but in many respects sums up how their season's gone. Did Toronto play great? No, I think the home crowd, you know, people last year talked all about the OpTic home crowd cheese. This year, there's not been so much talk about that with Toronto, and understandably so, but still, who knows? They've advanced in the first round. They can maybe make a run through the tournament, but the 2 series that we expected to be more clear cut, one of them kind of was, but it was still very competitive. I mean, look at this map 4, right? How absolutely shambolic that was for the Ravens, going up 224 to 194, and then managing to find a way to squander everything from then on out. So they go down, they drop down to the losers with some surprising other teams down there as well. And well, ladies and gentlemen, long have we waited for OpTic versus FaZe to be played at the World Championship again, and frankly, it was rather over quicker than we might have expected. It was 2017, the last time that OpTic and FaZe played at Champs. Dashy last played the Tiny Terrors at Champs back at eUnited when OpTic played them at 2019's Champs. We've not seen it in the last 5-6 years of World Championship matches, and over the last decade and plus of Call of Duty, this is the record. This year, FaZe had beaten OpTic 4 times they played them. Last year, they played them 8 times. They beat them 7-1 since Drazah. The matches before that, OpTic, of course, had their number, beating them 10-1 over the course of those couple of seasons. And as it stood, OpTic and FaZe were pretty much neck and neck tied all time in their records. But if you look at this graphic here, you will notice that even on OpTic's bad years, they always at least got one. 2018, 2020, 2021, they always at least got one victory on the board against Atlanta FaZe. And today, that was what we saw again. We talked about this coming into the tournament. OpTic said they were frying in scrims. We talked about it earlier on today. Do we believe them when they say it? Who knows? But I think it was pretty clear. Yes, OpTic had been putting in the time. They know this season was an absolute disaster. Bringing in Mercules, we talked about it earlier on today. The potential, the ceiling of this roster was always going to be getting higher and higher over time. And the reality is, in the same way that Thieves were looking at FaZe for the last month, FaZe were looking at Thieves for the last month. And I imagine they were thinking, look, it's OpTic. These guys this season, they ain't very good. We beat them before. We're going to go on and beat them again. We've got an insane record against them. OpTic come in. I've talked about them before the tournament. They were like, it feels funny to say that the reigning world champions were my dark horse of the tournament, but that was the case. I was talking about OpTic, you know, potentially being a team at least with the talent to make a serious run. That is very, very much true based on what we have seen today. And we talked about it for weeks. If there was any time to beat FaZe, any time to beat Thieves, now is the time in the very first round. So OpTic walk out. Of course, everywhere they go is going to be, you know, home crowd type of energy, right? But they hop onto the main stage. And immediately early on, I think it was pretty clear that, you know, OpTic were playing pretty well. Now, FaZe chose to go Team A here, which allowed them to choose Hacienda. They chose to play Hassi game 1. They had the first seed, or the number 1 seed in this series phase. They could have gone another direction. They didn't. They chose to take Hacienda to OpTic game 1, and OpTic beat them on it. That is a statement map. I think, honestly, Huke deserves so much credit for this map. There are a couple of key moments where Huke got a crucial series of kills, bought OpTic a load of time, and it wasn't a clear-cut game, but in the end, OpTic really played well on the final couple of rotations and won this game relatively comfortably for a Hassi Harput against FaZe, 250 to about 204. Game 2 gets underway. FaZe win the first round. You're thinking, okay, maybe it's business as usual. OpTic going to win the game 1, but FaZe are going to bounce back their dominant search and destroy. But this is when Mercules came to play, right? Like, this was such a huge moment for Mercules, I thought. There's not many players as a rookie that would play it like this. He tags up Cellium, he gets a couple of shots in, and he just goes for the chow. And Cellium just, I don't think, was expecting that level of aggression. It was just so perfectly played. And it's, oh, he's weak, you chal him, right? No brainer. And that's the way that Mercules thinks. But like, to see this be played 1v2 against FaZe in this type of moment, and to make it so clinical, to tie up the game 1-1, it, you know, it might not seem like a big deal, but this was a huge moment. Like, this 1v2 was a huge moment in the context of this series. And from then on, it only got better, right? Like, OpTic continued going from strength to strength. They won a boatload of rounds. They went up 5-2. Shotzzy got a first blood. Honestly, they were pretty clinical in closing out these advantages. And then the final map in the control, Hassi control, OpTic and FaZe both loved this map, but it was just a phenomenal performance of OpTic. Dashy stood up after going up 2-1 thinking they'd won. He then sat down again and realized they hadn't. Thankfully, it didn't backfire on him like it did on Red Reserve all those years ago, if you guys remember that World War II season. Dashy thought it was over. His boys are looking at him saying, please don't have jinxed us with this. And thankfully, for OpTic's sake anyway, it wasn't over, because they frankly dominate the final round on the offense, and FaZe go down at the first time of asking. Like, if you'd have told me today that one of Thieves and FaZe lost, I'd have said, yeah, I can certainly see it, right? We predicted OpTic to beat FaZe in our bracket. One of the only people to actually do it. I thought it was a sensible call. I had this series 55-45 to FaZe. But at the end of the day, OpTic took it without too much of a fight. You'd have told me both of those guys lost on day 1, both Thieves and FaZe and losers on day 1 of the World Championship. Look, criticize this World Championship all you want, but wow, do we have a tournament on our hands now. So very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Drazah, OpTic CEO, 0.65 this series. Simp on the main all-star team, 0.73 this series. Mercules with a 1.45. Huke with a 1.3. Masterclass against what's meant to be one of the absolute pre-tournament favourites. Where do we go from here? What a day 1. We'll be back tomorrow. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.